Hi, this is Keith Cook, along with my partner David Harmon. We're with RE/MAX here in Bellingham, Washington. We're going to go over a scenario that does happen on a semi-regular basis, not on every property, but it absolutely happens when there's a property for sale and there's more than one person that wants to buy it. As brokers, how do we work with the buyer, knowing how to make your offer as strong as possible if you're making a competing offer on how we can help you get that property? And from a seller standpoint, you have multiple offers. What do I need to look at? So we're going to go through the whole list of what we look at as brokers at the end of the day, how we can make your offer look great or how we can get you more money or better terms as a seller. So we're going to go through price and how do we get there with maybe an escalation clause or what the increments are, closing costs, down payment, the loan type, earnest money, closing, possession, inspection contingencies, what type of additional information is the buyer providing, like a pre-approval letter, they sign the disclosures, do they have proof of funds, who are we closing with, and other items that people may put in there. So it's important to realize, like, where do we get to multiple offers? And sometimes it's a highly unique property, sometimes it's priced low, sometimes there's a strategy with marketing it to price it a little less than market to get people to make their best offer. So really in any market, there has been multiple offers. So even in an absolute buyer's market, if the seller prices their property accordingly, there might be more than one party interested. Some buyers I don't want to compete, and it's tough for some buyers who have difficult financing scenarios to try to compete. But you can still, even FHA or VA, you can compete with cash offers even if you're getting a low down payment type of loan, as long as you present it properly. So anyways, let's dig into this and let Dave take it from here.
Yeah, so obviously we have the house that you're interested in. You want to make an offer. So the price is going to be where it comes up. And typically a house is going to have a listing price, right? So let's just say that the house is listed at $100,000. So you're going to make an offer at $100,000. Well, guess what? There might be three other people making an offer at $100,000. So if you're content at making that offer at $100,000, and if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, you're fine too. But maybe you want to make your offer maybe a little bit more enticing. And so what some people will do is they will offer $100,000, but then they will also include a document that we use, which is Form 35, which is an escalation of your offer. And so what that does is it states in there that you're going to make an offer, let's say for $100,000, but you're willing to spend up to $120,000 to get the home. So, but you don't want to make your offer at 120, you want to bump it up in increments. So if somebody else offers, say 110, your offer is going to match that up to that 110 and then whatever increments. And those increments are kind of important because you don't want to do it like $500 increments necessarily, because you want to be somewhat enticing to the seller. So if your terms are a little bit different, that it actually makes sense. So let's say that you're going to bump it up $2,500. So if that person makes that offer at $110,000, your offer is going to come in at $112,500. So you're going to beat it by $2,500 up to your max of $120 at that point. So that's kind of how the escalation works, and those increments.
It's a bit of a chicken way of not making your whole $120,000 offer. So you're kind of saying 120, but you're also saying, I don't want to go all the way there unless someone pushes me there. So right. Some people, there's different strategies. I've seen people leave it blank. Like, we'll just pay as much as we can. And so, but it is a good way to let the seller know that you're willing to spend more money on the property. You just don't want to commit to it.
Right.
And usually I look at offers as kind of like as an open ticket to negotiation. So I'd say it's fairly rare that the offer comes in exactly signed off as written, because even the pure nature, and we'll get into this, of how the escalation addendums are written, as brokers representing the seller, we don't usually accept those. We'll remove that and then just go to the price. So, right. And the reason that we do that, there is some verbiage in the escalation addendums that we'll get into that isn't really in the benefit of the seller. So right. You're in an interesting too, because if you have two people, let's just say you have two of them, and they go to 120. Now what do you do?
Right. Yeah, it's tough, and I've worked with buyers, and it makes sense that they're a little timid when it comes. They don't want to. It's like playing poker. They don't want to show their whole cards, and their concern is even on the escalation. If they say they're going to go to 120, they're worried that the seller's going to look at that and say, oh, they're willing to pay 120. And so I can see it from the buyer standpoint where they are a little timid. They don't want to come in at that high amount right off the gate, because what if they could save $5,000? Then it's $5,000 in their pocket. So it is a bit of a coaching process when it comes to being a broker, dealing with people and their emotions when it comes to making these offers with escalations, because it just makes some of them timid.
And what I like from the seller standpoint, let's just say there's two offers, and this one of them, the escalation one, and the second one's at 110. So the buyer's willing to go to 112.5. What I like to do is actually eliminate the addendum, and part of the addendum says that we're supposed to give you a copy of the other written agreement, but there's strings attached with that. So usually we will eliminate that addendum and then just counter on price. But going with the heart and the feel of what the offer is, your offer's saying that 110 is the highest offer. We'll go 25 above that. If you counter us at 112.5, that's what we're willing to do. And the benefit I like on the seller standpoint is that, hey, they really like the house. They were willing to spend more money on it, so they're more likely to close on it. And I like looking at the probability of closing. So if someone liked it for 120, they're getting it for 112.5, there's a higher chance they're going to close on it.
Right. Yeah, and there is a clause in here that it says that the competing offers have to be like kinds. So somebody can't be trading, an RV as part of the down payment. I mean, right. they can be financing and cash, but they have to be within an arm's length of commonality on the offers.
Right. And so we're kind of going through full offers, so not getting into the weeds on that. We could probably do more on some of that, just dealing with the escalation addendum. I know in classes we'll do a whole class on it, but just knowing there's different ways to deal with it. Either you come in with your highest and best, which is here's 120, and then in that case they would have had to pay 120 versus 112.5.
Right.
Some sellers, if someone wrote it at 120 and there was the competing one with you escalating up to there, the seller may just say, I'm going with the 120. They weren't playing games. So Some sellers think, well, what's the offer? What isn't the offer? And it's hard to reduce negotiations to writing as far as what your best price is, because these people are saying, all right, almost like we're going to do a little mini auction here. We'll beat someone else by a little bit till 2,500. But 2,500 is a great number.
All right, Keith. So we're moving on here. What's the next thing that we're looking at on these multiple offers?
So we're looking at price for sure, and then we're looking at how did they get that money? Is it cash? So if it's cash, that's great, because the seller knows there's not further contingencies that are going to come into play. So our purchase and sale agreements as written are written as cash. We do see a lot of cash sales, but we also see a lot of sales subject to financing. So usually someone's going to add an addendum to there and say, what does their financing look like? Is it conventional? Is it FHA? Is it VA? Is it USDA? Is it 0% down? Is it 50% down? What is it? So there's a lot of things associated with the buyer's down payment and the appraisal. So there's two parts with the financing that now open this up versus cash. So there's the buyer qualifying and the seller's home or the house qualifying. So buyer qualifies, the house qualifies. You could have a great buyer that qualifies, but if the house is in a wreck and it's not going to appraise or it's too much money, then that's a concern for the seller. So looking at trying to pick which one makes the most sense. How people will get that there's some things that you can do as a buyer to sweeten the pot. And that's what you're trying to do, is go out on the limb a little bit if this is the home you really want. If one thing is dealing with the appraisal, let's just say the home right here appraised at the 112 number we're using, let's just say it appraised for 100,000. Now where are we? So seller's like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Well, the buyer could have added an addendum saying that we'll pay 20 grand above the appraised price, and then the problem is solved. But it's having that buyer and that buyer's broker have that conversation ahead of time saying, what can we do to sweeten that pot? Because if we had two competing identical offers, everything's the same except for one person has the additional down of 20,000 representing the seller, we would need to say that's a stronger offer, everything being identical, because in the event of the scenario it doesn't appraise, we're going with the buyer who's going to make up the difference. Right. There's some things people can do, waiving financing, even though if you don't have a loan, as long as you're acknowledging that you're getting a loan, but you're not going to be contingent on getting a loan. That's super sketchy for buyers to want to do that, because what if it doesn't appraise, and then the seller's looking at earnest money amounts and who keeps it. So each situation is different. We're just kind of going over this generically, but if someone's trying to make that offer competitive, they may say, all right, I'm going to give you my earnest money deposit and I'm just going to make it happen. It doesn't matter what's going to happen. I will lose my earnest money if I can't pull financing off. But you're aware that I need to get a loan, and however I pull it off.
Right.
And so a lot of it just being straight up and honest, because the contracts state that I have the cash to close on it if I'm writing it that way. If I'm going to alter that until you still get your cash, but I'm taking the whole burden of the financing on me, from a seller standpoint, that's going to be a stronger offer. We don't see it that often, but that's kind of what some of this evidence of funds comes into play as well.
Right. How about I mean, obviously financing is a whole can of worms on its own, because obviously you could have somebody that came in with VA financing, FHA financing, other types of loans that are out there. And then how does that impact when you're going over multiple offers coming to closing?
So we look at our sheet. So we take our big sheet and we have like a dozen matrix that we look at on each scenario. So financing is absolutely a big one, and it's the probability of what we think closing will be. So we're looking at, from now the seller standpoint, what's the condition of the property and how likely is it for able to finance. So one is a condition. If it needs a roof, or it looks like it's worn, torn, and it looks like the appraiser may call for additional inspections, then it's important to know what the chances are of getting a loan that way, and also like what the ultimate sales price is. So if we're selling the house for 112 and we think it's only going to appraise for 100, then how are we going to look at that?
Right.
And a lot of it just depends on how much of the burden the buyer's looking to take. And I've seen some of these with multiple offers. If you're in a multiple offer situation as a buyer, you need to know that, because your offer is 100% or absolutely different than just making an offer singularly and just on one property. Because in a traditional one-on-one, one buyer, one seller, I think the buyers can actually negotiate for a lot more of what they're looking for. And that's why some buyers don't want to get into multiple offer situations, because they're really competing with all these other people, and they have to potentially give away some of their negotiation chips down the road. They have to play them all up front. It's like, I want this house, this is it, So it's tricky to look at that, but it's almost like a whack-a-mole. There's certain things you can do on each offer that even if you're weak in some areas, you can make some strengths in other areas to really make your offer. Say you're weak in one area, but you're strong in 6. Well, that's going to bring you up competing, even if you're like a low down payment type of loan. But if you're taking the risk away from the seller that you're going to pull the trigger and it's going to happen, maybe your offer becomes stronger because of the other items you've put in your offer. It's complicated. Really, it's a situation by situation. So you have to look at the property condition, and the buyer, and how important that house is. So there's a lot to look at on each scenario, and the condition.
Yeah. Then we look right next to that is the inspection, which I think the inspection is probably one of the biggest unknowns when you're going into this for some folks. Mm-hmm. Some people that have really taken care of their house and had it gone through the years. They've had the furnace serviced, they've had the roof cleaned, replaced, whatever. They really know what's going on. Probably a little bit less of a concern for some folks that have never been in the crawl space of their house for years, and now somebody's going to come along and they're going to do an inspection. So when we look at the inspection on here, technically what they generally have is X amount of days. So let's say they have 10 days to come out and do the inspection.
So in a traditional sale, let's just say one-on-one, one buyer, one seller, traditionally a buyer's going to have an inspection from anywhere between 5 and 10 days from mutual acceptance on a residential house. If it's commercial or land, I mean, you can be going months and months from what's there on feasibility. But so knowing what you're initially looking at with your inspection, and this is a big trick or a big playing card, is like how each person deals with that inspection and how the seller will look at it on the, on the comparing all the offers chart.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you're 100%. So to be competitive, I mean, if the standard maybe is 10 days to have that inspection, you might want to come in and say, hey, we can get that inspection done.
In 9 days? Like, what's like, make a note, I'll name that tune.
Name that tune, yeah. So yeah, you might come in and say, we can do it, if you know that your inspector is well, that you can come in and have it done in 5 days. Because what this does is during this inspection period of time, the seller has to take the property off the market.
Right.
So now they're kind of at the mercy of the buyer to get through this process in a speedy way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, coming in and saying, we can get this done in 5 days, and we're going to find out what's going on.
All things being equal on all the contracts, one 10-day inspection, one 5-day inspection, representing the seller, you're going to say go with the 5 days because that's in the seller's advantage. So You're trying to put things, entice the seller. And if as a buyer, you could have the inspection. Sometimes I know you'll either do a pre-inspection or have them ordered ahead of time. So you might be able to do inspection in 3 days because if you already have it scheduled. So there is a big strategy on that. It's absolutely a conversation that the buyer's broker and the buyer should be having. Like, where do we position ourselves in here?
Yeah, so definitely, yeah. If the seller is allowing it and you have time to do that pre-inspection, then your offer comes in, and guess what? You don't have to have that contingency on there, which is a big plus on there.
So the pre-inspection is. So how does that work?
Well, the pre-inspection, you actually it's pretty much the same thing as your inspection, but you're doing it. You have to get approval by the seller to come in and have your inspector come in, and he's going to do the inspection on the house, and you're going to know everything that they discover, and then you're going to be able to make your offer.
So
based
before
pre-offer. Pre-offer. Yep. So you're actually able to go. You're going to pay your inspector their amount to go do it, but you're going to know before you actually make your offer the condition of the house. So it's going to be definitely a benefit. So
then your offer would come in. What would it say on the inspection? Waived or pre-inspection completed, and you're not having an inspection.
Right. Yeah. You've waived that contingency on there.
So just assuming that how is that an advantage to the seller?
Well, it's that unknown. They know the person coming in. They don't have that contingency because if you have the inspection contingency coming in, there's a lot of unknowns that can happen. The buyers, then their contingency is pretty much either just financing or not, so that the ask later on after an inspection isn't really there.
So on the regular inspection, and it's just going with the MLS forms and what we have, buyer has an inspection on just say one buyer, one seller, offers made, offers accepted, it's subject to an inspection. During that inspection period that the buyer is going to perform, they have the inspection, and it's contingent on that. It's contingent on buyer's subjective approval of that inspection. So comes back, the buyer doesn't like the light switches or the light bulbs. Basically, the buyer can change their mind. Buyer can, at that point, after their inspection, say, I want 20% off, or I want a new roof, or I want gold-plated faucets, or, there's a lot of things. You just don't know what the buyer's going to ask for. And that's the big risk for the sellers, just like who is going to be most likely to, be kind to deal with, because negotiations haven't ended yet because there's still that inspection. And for the most part, on any home, there's going to be a potential ding list. Even new construction, there's yet to be a perfect inspection. Right. So there's always something someone could ask for, versus having the pre-inspection. You're saying, nope, check that box. This is our offer. We're not going back at a second bite at the apple, and we're not going to try to lower the price or ask for any concessions. Here's what we had. They may have asked for something in their offer because there may be something that they've discovered in their pre-inspection that they want to address, but they know that ahead of time, and it actually puts them in the best position to make their best offer, because now they'll say, all right, well, this thing's in a lot better shape than we thought. Maybe we'll go 125 versus 120, right, because we know more about it.
100%. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of the inspection form actually has a lot of things that can happen, so you can actually get an additional time. So let's say you have 5 days. Well, then guess what? Then if the inspector says, hey, you need to have a contractor come look at the roof, guess what? You get some additional time. So now that's more time off the market. So a lot of times we've seen the sellers say, okay, you can have your inspection, you can have it done in 5 days, but guess what? You don't get the additional time for to have a contractor out. So it's basically you get 5 days, that's it. You have to make up your mind at that point in time. Or they may go as far as saying, guess what? You can have your inspection, but it's going to be a pass-fail inspection, meaning that we don't want you coming back and asking, to change the color of the light bulbs. We don't want any work orders based on your findings. You're either going to like the house or not like the house. And usually there's workarounds on that. That's just an ask, but you see some different things because the inspection contingency can get long, drawn out. There's a lot of it's basically 3 parts, buyer, seller, buyer, and there's a lot of things that can happen within there. So they try to skirt around that, but I mean,
it's letting the seller know as soon as possible. So waiving the inspection, boom, we're straight off into a sale. But buyer has 5 days or 10 days. Usually what they can do, they can ask for additional time of 5 days if their inspection finds something. So now you're adding 5 days. At the end of the 5 days, they can make a request, and then for the items to be repaired, so say we want a roof, then the seller has 3 days to respond to that, and the buyer has another 3 days. So now you've eaten up half a month just trying to figure out the buyer's inspection, even though the intention may not have been to go on that long. So, but looking at what the liabilities are for a seller, like they've got, say, 6 people to choose from, how are they going to pick the right one? Well, if there's not an inspection, even if that offer is less money, that could be more attractive. Right. So the money thing isn't always the number one target. A lot of sellers like to look at the money, but you also have to look at what the liability is for getting that money.
Right.
So each property should be looked at, evaluated independently. Right. By no way are we saying to waive an inspection. Sometimes buyers may come in and they're like, I'm not going to have it inspected. And sometimes because it's either in such poor shape, they're not worried about it, or it's in such great shape, they're not worried about it.
Yeah.
Or if it's something like a condominium or something, you kind of see, like you get a feel for the interior of the unit. Inspections are, not cheap. And sometimes they're like, well, I'll just self-insure and put that money towards fixing it up, knowing that in the association is taking care of the outside. So
right. Yeah, because because there is a form that we make people sign if they're not going to have an inspection, stating the fact that they were given the opportunity, but they're waiving their right to have that inspection just for liability issues. So.
Yeah, it's a lesser for the sellers, and letting the seller know you're not going to have it inspected is a good thing. But you should. We don't recommend that you not get an inspection, but also I can see where you're in a position of we don't want to over-represent someone and not get the house. So if we're going to have a list and we're 6 offers that are in there, the one that has 20 contingencies on, the title, on septic, on, there's a lot of inspections or contingencies that a buyer can put in there. So usually the seller is looking for the path of least resistance, and the inspection can generally be a big hurdle to cross.
Right.
So what will happen, closing date and possession, maybe that's important to a seller or not. It depends on if it's going to be owner occupied or if it's a rental. So if you're dealing with the owner and it's a rental property, they're not going to have the same feelings as far as how to deal with that tenant. But there are some things you can put in there saying, all right, we'll accept the tenant the way it is.
Right.
Or, and then we'll subject to that lease and we'll deal with them. That's making it easier for the seller versus saying you need to have that tenant move. Okay, with multiple offers, the seller's going to take the path of least resistance. You take it with the tenant, that's easier for the seller. If it's owner occupied, our terms, and they're redoing this as where we're at right now, but when does the closing date and when does the buyer get to move in? So the closing date is usually that's down depending on the financing, or if it's cash, closing from the day you write the contract to the day it actually closes and funds, the seller gets their money, usually 30 to 45 days. But from the closing date, when does the buyer get to move in? And that's something else the buyer can put in their agreement saying, all right, well, we'll close in 30 days, but we're going to let you have 2 weeks to move out,
Right.
just so that you can have the money, go move, and make it an easier move, versus saying we close in 30 days, we want to move in 30 days, and you're asking the seller to move out prior to them having all their money and not knowing where they're going to. So a lot of it's communication and understanding from the buyer's perspective, what is the seller looking for, and trying to mirror that. Because knowing if there's multiple offers, if it's imperative that the sellers have 2 weeks after closing and you write your offer that they want it on closing, even if your offer is 10 grand more, the seller might say, I'm going for the 2 weeks because that's important to me. Right. So it's not always money. It's a matter of trying to figure out what are the conveniences for the seller.
Right. Yeah. And I think the concern there is from the seller standpoint is up until that the home is recorded and everything's finalized, there's a chance that something could happen and the seller doesn't get their money until it actually closed and is recorded and then the money is dispersed. So if they move, a week before and then for something happens to the buyer at the last moment, now all of a sudden they've moved, their house is sitting there and they don't have any money. So guess what? Now they have to put their house back on the market and try to find another buyer. And they've done all this money. They've spent money to move. They've done everything else. And sometimes people are strapped, so it does make a financial burden on them. So giving them those extra couple of days just gives them the security that now, okay, they can breathe. The money's in their account. They can move on with the next phase of their life.
Right. And they all kind of tie together a little bit. So with earnest money. So earnest money in Washington State is typically up to 5% of the purchase price. What can you do with the earnest money? Usually the bigger the earnest money, the stronger the buyers look. So there's nothing wrong with looking strong. If, say, you wanted to move in on the date of closing, well, if you released some of that earnest money or gave the seller a deposit ahead of time and said, well, listen, I realize it's important for you to be out after and closing, but it's more important for me as the buyer. I want in at closing. So, riddle me this. How about if I give you $25,000 up front, and you can go ahead and move on your merry way, but on the day of closing, I'd like to move in.
Right.
So now what that helps with the seller is like, wow, all right, of all of these offers, half a dozen offers, we've got one guy right here saying, I get earnest money right away, or I get earnest money a week before closing. So I'm going to get some seed money earlier, something you can do to make your offer stand out from the rest. Is it a risk? Absolutely. You'd want to make sure to check title and everything else, because what you're saying is if you don't buy the property, you've just handed the seller that amount of cash. Right. So, but can you put that in there to make your offer look better? Absolutely. I guess other things we look at, still on earnest money, not that you have to necessarily release it, but usually earnest monies are between 1% and 5% of the price. So you want to come in with a strong looking earnest money. Right. So when people come in with $1,000 or a low down earnest money, that can work in some situations, but you're trying to put your best foot forward. Right. You can also, if we didn't get into it, like other documentation that people may provide. One is the sellers are supposed to have a seller disclosure on the property, and the buyer has a chance to review that disclosure. If the buyer signs off on the disclosure at the time of presenting their offer, and so all things being equal, one person's completely signed off on the disclosure and one person hasn't, you'll go with the person who has, because our job is to point out how the contract can fail. And from the seller standpoint, trying to eliminate all the fail points up front makes it the strongest offer. Are they going along with, we'll put in there a lot of times the title and escrow company. It is up for negotiation, but we like to get title up front so that people can make sure we're good. So if we've got a clear title report with company X, then let's just go with that company, Chicago Title. The other thing is, which what we're going through right now is fair housing. Mm-hmm. And so people will add love letters. What's a love letter, Dave?
Yeah, love letters. I mean, it makes sense. It's just stating who your buyers are, maybe a little bit of background on them. I think the cautionary tale on that is probably shouldn't have photos on there. Shouldn't really explain too much about your your background, familial status, anything that's related to fair housing. As brokers, we
just did these classes, so
Yeah.
we are.
as brokers, we have to submit these items because that's our job, is to submit things to the sellers. So whether or not that's your practice, I think definitely due diligence and make sure that you're following all of the fair housing guidelines, making sure that there's nothing.
That's the past is the past, and there's a lot of animosity and just they used to do real estate crazy back in the days, and it's not us, but some of our elders have really witnessed it more than us, and it's just being aware of the situation, and it's difficult because the buyer's trying to let the seller know how cool they are and how much they love the house and are going to want to do that. But it does and can put brokers in a pickle and making sure that we can't discriminate on how to deal with things. So there's all kinds of classes. I mean, we've just got 6 clock hours just going through nothing but how to deal and treat people, fairly. So it's a whole different thing on how to deal with it, but they do come into play where people will have, we'll call them love letters. It's just a personal letter to the seller stating how much you like it.
Right.
We'll also get sometimes proof of funds. And so the nice thing with a proof of funds letter is someone writes it, and if I give you a proof of funds that I got 200,000 and you're offering up to 120, that's going to look like a pretty good offer because we're going to know someone has the funds to close.
Right.
My favorite was we had a sale, and we had 2 competing offers. It's happened once, but one buyer came and met with the seller. It was my seller. We brought the buyer in, and he brought a shoebox. And in the shoebox was all the cash to make the payment. So it was pretty impressive to open up. And it was an okay shoebox, nothing fancy. Inside the shoebox was awesome, though. It was all the cash. So we got all these offers. We put them into play. And then what happened? So we will kind of rate all of these offers. And then figure out which one's going to most likely work for the seller. And then we kind of see how many people at that point may want to massage it. So it may be, say we ended up with 4 offers. Well, maybe the first people don't know there's a couple more offers yet, and they wrote it just thinking they had a one-on-one. Well, as brokers, we need to communicate with them and say, sorry, it doesn't look like you're going to get it. And then they're like, why? And we're like, well, we got a couple other folks that like it more. And they're like, well, let me call my buyers and see what they would do. And they're all of a sudden they call their buyers, and something went from the bottom of the pile now may have leapfrogged to the top of the pile because of that communication and how to, for that buyer to express their interest in the property. Now they leap to the top of the pile for whatever reason. Then we let the other folks know, sorry, it didn't work out. And now they may want to leap to the top of the pile. And that's what these multiple offer situations are, is trying to figure out what's most important to the seller and then trying to deliver to the seller. So it may be to go to the top of the pile, may be that the seller gets to stay after closing for 30 days.
Right.
And I know I personally bought a house, and loved the house over in Birchwood, and we had to rent it back to the sellers for 90 days. It killed me. I wanted to be in that house, but I knew day 91, I'd rather be living there than not. I think they probably took the full 90 days. I was just like bated breath, ready to get in there. I'm making the payments on the house, and it was like, when do we move in? But it's like looking at the big picture. If that's what it takes to get this house, if this is the end all be all home, then, be smart about it. Don't give up on it, just on the closing date or a possession date. So we put all these offers together, and then either the buyer's going to send in a counter offer for what we're talking about. A lot of times these offers are getting updated once people figure out where they fit in the mix. There's this kind of negotiation that will go on. We were talking to a lot of the brokers on the phone, text, or email, just trying to communicate where they're at in the process. They're updating their buyers, updating us, and it's kind of it's a lot of work.
Right.
It's easier just with one offer because we're dealing with that, but it's trying to make sure to get the perfect offer. Now, with our marketing, how did we get to these multiple offers? Usually what we do if we're representing a seller, so we're listing the property, listing brokers, we will sign a listing, then we will set out Kyle and the gang to get all the photos and video and 3D and YouTubes and all the marketing stuff. So we're ready to go. If you ask us what day we'd like to list on, usually it's a Thursday, assuming it's not a 3-day weekend, and list it on a Thursday. Ideally, we will have a review date, and we're anticipating all kinds of activity that we're going to review offers on Tuesday. Usually we like to go Tuesday because that gives the buyers a chance to have contacted their broker, get a chance to go in there and take a look at it. On Monday, talk to the bank and make sure they got their best pre-qualification or approval letter from their lender saying we can buy it, and then get their offer in on Tuesday. So that's what we can do to kind of build the hype. Not somewhat similar to this, but not the kind of the workaround for the buyer is, all right, we wait until Tuesday for review date. Mm-hmm. Or even if there's a review date, you can make an offer ahead of time.
Right.
And so say they're asking for $100,000 for the listing. If you come in on Friday when the review date's Tuesday, maybe you'll say, all right, we'll go 120, but our offer expires Friday at 9 p.m.
Right.
All right, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, fish or cut bait. What do you want to do?
Right. And that's where, I mean, if there's going to be a strong one, that you definitely don't want there to be, 20 different contingencies on there. I mean, you never know, but if you're going to come in early on a property that's going to be of desire to a lot of buyers, then you definitely want to make your offer something attractive that the buyers want.
Well, and you don't want your offer necessarily getting shopped. Or so what you may do, usually if you're going to come in before a review date, you're going to have an expiration date on that, so people aren't shopping it around. Multiple offers are exhilarating from the seller standpoint, knowing that you might get something. We've had multiple offers where we didn't even get up to list price, but you just have people interested at the same time. Okay. And inevitably that may be something, properties on the market 90 days. Guess what? 2 people are interested at the same time. So multiple offers are always out there. I think they always will be out there. They're not going away, but just how to deal with them and how to read the situation, understand what's going on. And that's where, working with your broker to try to help put that together will definitely benefit you.
Yeah, and I would throw in too on the buyer standpoint, because it can be discouraging for a buyer in multiple offers, because maybe you think you don't have a chance. Well, guess what? If you don't put in an offer, you don't have a chance, because we always consider it's a ticket to the game. So if you don't have a ticket to the game, guess what? And if the lottery's there and you didn't buy a ticket, guess what? Your chances of winning are 0. Right. So if you like the house enough to make an offer, get your offer in. It gets you a ticket. You never know what happens. We generally don't pick the offers. The sellers, we kind of guide them through the sheets, show them pros and cons, but it's up to the seller to pick the actual offer that they want. So if you don't have an offer in there, guess what? They can't pick it.
So with vacant land, I wouldn't say it's necessarily as much of an opportunity for these multiple offer situations. It can happen, but usually a buyer is going to have more questions on vacant land because they don't know what they can put there, if it's or the cost to build. So I wouldn't say we run into these scenarios as much on a vacant land, because usually a buyer is going to want to research it a little bit more to understand what they have. On commercial or multifamily properties, it can be a bit confusing too. There, it depends on how much information the seller has provided up front. So are there leases? Have they had a chance to look at the books, the records, the leases, all of the information? So making the assumption all of that information was provided up front, it might be easier for a buyer to make a more competitive offer. But usually if we're representing a buyer, we're going to want to make sure that you have a chance to make sure, there's not someone in unit 9 that has a 100-year lease at $100 a month,
right.
So you want to make sure that you know what you're getting into that way. Usually on our listings, what we'll do is we try to get copies of the books, records, leases, maintenance records, all of that stuff, and have that in a separate file. And we're not just going to provide that to any buyer unless they sign a non-disclosure. So sellers are putting up more, kind of financial information on the property. If a buyer agrees not to share that just with Twitter or, just put it out in the interweb, then it makes sense for someone to have that information.
Yeah, I think definitely. There's in land, even apartments, everything else. Yeah, you're going to have a feasibility, a due diligence time frame. As far as when we're the selling brokers, like Keith was saying, we try to have that stuff in hand, ready to go, because you don't want somebody spending 6 months in feasibility when it's stuff that we could get and provide right up front. So whether that is the resale certificate for a condo, books, records, any reports, whether on land, if it's a wetland report or any type of land use information that's available, we provide that up front to make that easier for the buyer. So if you did have multiple offers, they don't have to go out there and try to overturn the rocks looking for stuff that we didn't give to them.
I agree. You're totally spot on. I mean, for at least from our position, whether it's a buyer or a seller, we try to provide as much information as we have our hands on. And if a lot of times, if a seller's had a property for quite a while, they've got a lot of information on the property, and we'd like to provide that to the buyers up front so that they know what they're getting into, because it's frustrating for all properties or all parties to go through a purchase and sale agreement only to have it fail. And if it was going to fail from information that was already pre-existing, it was just kind of a waste of time for all parties. So why not get that information to the buyer ahead of time as much as possible?
Right.
And some of the documentation that might be out there for the buyer on say a multifamily property, they're going to need for the lender anyway. So they need to see copies of these books, records, leases, all that stuff. So we try to, as listing brokers, get as much information out there as much as possible ahead of time. When we're buyers brokers, we know what's there, what's not there, what are we missing. We're trying to see, like, we'll fill in the gaps, like, well, why don't we have one of these? So it's a fun job, but there's just a lot of information that we try to exchange between buyer and seller. Hope you enjoyed this. Again, each property is its own unique scenario. Each situation is different. Each buyer, each seller, each opportunity. So everything's just really be evaluated, and that's fun from the buyer's standpoint. When we're working with buyers, it's like, all right, what's the likelihood of finding a better spot than this, or a replacement, or a similar opportunity? And I think that's going to let us know, like, how far we should push your offer, or just your whole situation. So that's the fun part, is like really having these discussions with people to say what's going to be best for you. And if this is the unicorn property, then we're going to get you a unicorn offer.
Right.
If you're the seller standpoint, it's like, sit back and just see how this works, and hopefully enjoy that you got a good offer. The flip side to this is sellers that in different markets might say, all right, kind of more the old school, like, well, we can always come down, so it's like they want to start it at 150 and then go a month and then lower it to 144 or 145 and then kind of bring it down. And ultimately, I think it's proven that the longer you're on the market, probably the less likely you're going to get to your price. And sometimes then your motivation changes, and you start off too high. Maybe now you only got 95 for that versus 100, which you were initially asking. So I think pricing is important right off the bat, and it just depends on your individual scenario, and like when to hit the market, when is the timing, what's your marketing, what are your brokers doing for you, what's the guidance on both sides, buyers and sellers. So obviously, if you've seen any of our other shows or channel or watched any of this, we love this stuff, and it's fun to talk about. So love to talk about your individual situation too.
Yeah, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, and also like, subscribe, and then if there's anything you'd like us to address and go over on one of our videos, go ahead and drop us a note below. And just all positive feedback is awesome.